Good morning, everybody. Brian Vasquez here, Crack a Smile. Today is my 40th birthday. Getting old, that's when the pain and ache's supposed to kick in. But today I want to talk about transparency, and I want to start with myself. I want to start with revealing my story and how I got to where I'm at now, and also just talk about the trials and tribulations that I went through. I feel if I share my story, maybe other people will share theirs. So I'm gonna be completely open, and I hope that through my trials and tribulations, somebody else can reveal something that touches and helps somebody else. So with that said, we're gonna go back to the journey. We started in Lancaster in Columbia, PA. That's where I was born. When I was a child, I lived a normal life. My mother and dad were married. They were together. We was three boys. We lived in Cover Bridge, and we lived in a two-bedroom apartment when three boys shared one room. Now I wouldn't say that was fun, a little jam-packed, but we made it work, and we lived a pretty good life. The family was family back then, and everybody would come down and visit, or we'd go places to go visit, and we just always used to do things together, family reunions, stuff like that. When I was about 8 years old was when my father and mother split up. My dad had left. I remember that was a tough time in my life because he was a disciplinary. My dad was the one that kept us, making sure we were doing good in school. He'd whoop us up if we weren't doing what was right. And I remember he left, for whatever reasons he left, and things changed in my life. We used to live across the street from community housing, and we never thought we were better than anybody because back then we just thought we lived in a blue house and everybody lived in a brick house across from us. We were in a row home, they were in a row home. But in the reality, what turned out to be is that, the only difference between us and them was we lived across the street. My mother had to get a job. She was working hard to try to maintain a house. They had just bought a brand new house when my dad decided to leave. And my mother ended up working about 3 to 4 jobs. So she would be able to pay mortgage and support us kids. And I remember my dad, he was in and out of our lives at that time. He was out there trying to find himself. He was just a young man because he was a kid when he was having kids. So, with that said, with mom not being home, dad not around, we used to cross that street and go, be around other people and, see what was going on. And we had ventured off to understand and learn things about like drugs and alcohol and different things like that. And I remember when I was 12 years old, it was the first time I started selling drugs. I started selling weed. By then I was smoking cigarettes, drinking alcohol. Still trying to be, a good kid, play sports with a lot of the older kids, younger kids. I mean, we just always used to make things happen. When I go back to my childhood, I think about how creative we were as kids to make games up and how we did things and how we survived. We honestly never knew where our next meal was going to come from. To this day, I don't eat ramen noodle because we had so many by the caseload. I thought my mother was smuggling them in. But, in the end, very grateful for everything we went through. And my mother taught me that, you had to sacrifice. And so through the struggles of, getting your, notices, your electrical is going to be cut off, your mortgage, house might be foreclosed and all that, my brothers, would work and try to help out my mother, especially my brother Joey Vasquez, he was the oldest one. So he took on the brunt of the damage of my father leaving. And I remember him just working and having to give his paycheck to my mother, and probably his childhood was taken away from him a lot. I just remember myself, delivering newspapers, and would get up every morning. Mom would take me, and I get a paycheck anywhere from $54 to $84, and my mom would take me, and I get a sausage muffin with egg at McDonald's, and then the rest of my check would go to my mother to help out. And through those experiences, I just always was thinking to myself, man, this is not how I want to live, and I wanted to find a different way. And so through selling drugs, I was like, hey, it's an easier way to get money. It was tax free, and I had to try to survive. I remember my mother finally shipped me to my father's house, which is in Lancaster, PA, about 20 minutes away. And my father's, again, he's a disciplinary, and he made sure that I walked a straight line. I started doing better in school. I still wanted to be cool, still was a manipulator, and still was into women, drinking. But it's very selective when I had to do it because the pops found out, I was definitely going to get smacked in my face or get an earful. Um, so I lived with my father till I was about, I think, 15 or 16. There was a trial that happened between me and my stepbrother, and I just couldn't take it no more, and I ended up leaving and moved back with my mom. As I was living with my mother, I started selling drugs again, and I ended up getting caught. And I just remember, trying to jump out the second story window and trying to run from the cops when they tried to come at my mother's house. And I ultimately ended up getting, arrested. And so, with that said, um, my brother and my mother talked about shipping me to Junk City, Kansas. Now, this is a tough pill to swallow because, I'm used to the East Coast. I'm used to all my friends and family. And now I'm going to be shipped somewhere where it's just my brother and my sister-in-law, Tracy. This was very tough for me because at that time in school, I was getting all F's and one C. I knew, honestly, I had to do something different because, the way I was going, it just wasn't going to be good. Well, I remember missing about 60 some days of school to 80 some, and the only person that beat me was my best friend. I think he had 100 some, and it was just a tough, and so this decision was hard, but it had to be done, and I was just a child, so I really didn't have no say in it. So I moved to Junk City, Kansas, and when I got there, man, the land was so flat. It still is flat, and I didn't know what there was to do. I remember I used to walk to school, and different people would come up to me. They would talk about gangs and different things and I knew nothing about gangs at this point. I remember growing up, we had posses and different things like that, but I was just a new kid trying to fit in. I was just trying to let people know I'm cool, and try to bring my swag, and but as time went on, I learned to adjust. I learned to make Junk City my home, and I learned to just do better. I was doing real good in school. My brother had wrote a letter to the school. I mean, to back to Lancaster, PA, and was saying that my brother would not go to court, and that he's doing real well, and that if you would just give him his fine or whatever it is, I'll make sure he walks a straight line. And so I guess the charges ended up getting dropped, and I started my journey in Kansas. Um, Things didn't change with Brian. I still was manipulating, I was drinking, and still just was out there for myself. I definitely, had to go and continuously try to find ways to rob Peter to pay Paul. I thought I was, the honey master. I thought I was just, doing everything that meant everything to Brian, but was very very selfish and just didn't want to, understand what it was to work as a team. Through this time, I ended up finishing high school and I graduated. And when I graduated, I know my brother was kind of through with me, and he said it was time for me to go back home. So I went back to Pennsylvania, and I stayed there for just a little bit, and then I ended up going to Staten Island, New York. And here, when I went there, I started selling drugs. Now, if anybody knows anything about New York, I don't think anybody that's not from there should be going around selling drugs in an area that you don't know anything about. And through the grace of God, nothing ever happened to me. Now, I don't know how, because I'm walking in project buildings all over, and I'm surrounded by, individuals standing by the door, just like you see in the movies, and doing different things. There's no GPS. I'm just driving and getting guided by my cousin and different things. And it was a tough pill to swallow. And I remember one time I came back from New York and I came to Pennsylvania. Mom was throwing a barbecue. And she had a few people around her, at the time. And I came and I had some gold teeth, I had my initials in there, had diamonds and different things. And I thought it was the stuff. And I remember pulling out a wad of money and telling my mom, "Here you go." And I'll never forget this day because it's just like the movies. My mom looked at me and she said, "How'd you get this money?" I said, "Mom, I'm working." I lied. And I said, "I just wanted to help you out." And my mother said to me, "I don't want your drug money," and actually pretty much threw the money back to me. And I remember just leaving there, and I went back to New York, and I just was, kind of lost. But I continued to do what I was doing, saving money. And I remember making a phone call. I went to a payphone, and I was crying. I was telling my brother back home in Junction City that, "Hey, I want to come back. This is not the life for me. This is not what I see my life being. This is not who Brian is." And I remember the first time, he wasn't accepting. He was kind of like, "Hey, you had your chance up here," and he rejected me. And I remember getting off that phone crying, and I went back and wiped my tears off and just went back to doing what I was doing. Eventually, I made another call to my brother and said, "Hey, man, I'm gonna end up dead or something's gonna happen," And so With that said, my brother gave me a chance. He said, hey, I'm going to let you come back up here. You're going to roll in DeVry, and you're going to stay here, use your own money, and then you're going to end up going up, to Kansas City and, and start your life. And I was very thankful for that, and through that, my my brother, I get up there, I'm using my own money, and my brother allowed me to go and go back to Kansas City, and allowed me to help me get into college and everything. And I went to college, and I was doing the same thing, manipulating women, drinking, and trying to do good in school. I didn't have a vehicle at first, so it was tough. I was, utilizing friends to get me back and forth. And then my brother helped me out with a Pontiac Le Mans. I remember that car was a little hatchback egg, and I used to had some beats in it, and I would drive that thing around, thought I was everything. But long story short, I ended up quitting college. I ended up getting a full-time job to help out a little bit back home, and also just to survive myself. It's a decision that I wish I probably never did, but here I am today. At 21 years old, I had my first child, Savannah Vasquez. Beautifulest thing I've ever seen or ever met in my life. It was a tough pill, to swallow because I really didn't want to have a child at that age, but it was something that I had to learn and become an adult quick. Having a child, changed you a little bit, but in my world, I still was saying, Brian, I was selfish. I didn't understand, what I was supposed to do and how I needed to depend. I had somebody that was depending on me. With that said, I still lived a careless life. I was out cheating and, drinking. I was working a full-time job. That was never a problem, me working, but I still was being manipulative and just continuously trying to be strong for myself and really not nobody else. So 2 years later, I ended up having another daughter, Evelyn Vasquez, the second beautifulest thing I've ever seen in my life. And with that, I still was being the same person. I was in a reckless relationship then. I mean, our relationship was volatile. It was, very, verbally abusive. I mean, it was just terrible. And I continuously, staying there because I wanted to try to be in my child's life, but also I was infatuated and I loved the love-hate relationship. I think after that, I moved to Pennsylvania. I wanted to help my mom out, but to be honest with you, I lost my job as well. So it was a tough thing I was going through, and I moved my family to Pennsylvania. And this was hard because my daughter was about 7 months old, and me and the kid's mom did not get along at all. And she actually wanted me to sign my rights over for my child because she was going to get married. And I remember that, and I got that letter and it made me cry because I was always reaching out. And even though I didn't have money back then, I was sending gifts to my daughter on her birthday, different things like that. Just trying to let her know, that I'm here for her, and I just wanted to really, see my child. But, my kid's mother was bitter at me for the things I've done, and which is well deserved, and I understood. But anyways, long story short, I end up, being down there in Lancaster, PA, and my brother had his own business at the time where he was dealing with Nextels and different things like that. And he, I remember calling him and asking him for an opportunity to come up. And at this point in my life, I don't want to forget that I was on the run in Kansas. I had did different things, breaking the law, like drinking and driving and different things that, I was just on probation. I get probation revoked. And so when I moved up to Wisconsin, I was working with my brother and I was on the run the whole time. And I remember, this was tough every day because I would think about being extradited. Extradited is when, you're in one area and they hold you until the other area comes and gets you. And I would hear stories where people sit for 6-7 months before they would even go over to the next town. So I was very scared. And so through all this going on, I moved up there and I wanted to help my brother's company become #1, but also I was thankful for the opportunity he gave me. Crazy thing about it was, we ended up blowing up and becoming the #1 dealer. I think my brother might have been #1 before me as well, but I mean, we were doing numbers that were just astronomical, and I was just out there reckless. I mean, I was out there just having fun, still being manipulative, working hard. During the day, it's like a split personality, and I just remember, going through things and just arguing with my brother, and you would think that we would be like, partners or whatever it was, and our great minds would think alike. But unfortunately, my brother was so far ahead of me at that point in my life. I just was lost. I was like Allen Iverson, of the cell phone game. I was like, hey, don't worry about practice. Don't worry about what goes on in my afterlife. Let's just focus on what we're doing. But, through my reckless behaviors, we ended up splitting, and I moved to Kansas City, and I moved back here, and not only be in my daughter's life again, but also I moved back up here because I want to start my own business. I had about 20 grand saved from working with my brother, and I moved up here and I started my own business called Lead Communications. And this was tough at first because I had a partner Maurice and I had a buddy Cameron as well, and these guys were at first reluctant. Maurice was very very, kind of, he wanted to be involved, but he had a full-time job, and, I had to convince him, to leave his job and let us, start this business and, get it rolling. And man, it was tough. I remember I dropped off about 7,000 flyers and I didn't get one call. I was going, wow, how do you start a business, like this? But anyways, through the grace of God, I remember I got my first call from Cos Lexico Construction. It was a $35 service call. And I'll never forget it, man. I had that check and I was like, man, just, had it hanging. I probably still have it to this day somewhere in my house, but it was just the breakthrough that I needed. It was the confidence I needed to keep going. And so throughout the years, we worked, and in the beginning you had money, you had inventory, no money, money no inventory, vice versa. And I kept going, and I was just continuing to work. But through this all, I was getting in trouble, still getting in trouble with the law, still making mistakes, still, I remember getting locked up. I'm running a business and I'm locked up in jail. Calling my guys saying what would need to be done and different things like that, having them run my cell phone until I get out. Also, I remember being on the run, while I was running my business in the beginning. So definitely was some tough trials and tribulations. The one thing though, I was being a good father. Every weekend I was getting my kids, or every other weekend, whatever the plan was, and I was, being with my children, and then that made me happy, you know what I mean? But I still was about Brian and selfish. So through these times, I was getting in trouble still with the law and continues to run my business. And at this point, I'm running a successful business. I was about 26 years old, and I was sitting with about $350,000 in the bank account. I had vehicles. I had just bought my first house. My dad helped me get my house, and I just remember life was good, but I still was unhappy. I still was out there cheating, being manipulative, and doing things that, were just, uncalled for. It wasn't until I was about maybe 30, 32 where I started feeling like I was becoming a man, where I started understanding the consequences of my actions that I was doing. Back then I would get in trouble and I always would blame everybody else. Well, that cop shouldn't have been where I was at. He wouldn't have caught me for a DUI. That's his fault. He was waiting there for Brian Vasquez to come by, and that's when he pulled me over. Or, and so through this time, when I started to become a man, I started realizing things, and things started changing my life. And the relationship I was in, it wasn't attractive anymore because I started seeing what we were doing to each other. And to me, it just wasn't healthy. And through different things that went on, finally we ended up splitting up. And again, I got in another relationship, and I had a good one. And, I made mistakes through that relationship, and we ended up separating as well. But still, even to this day, I deal with, being able to be, being compassionate, or also, being, vulnerable in situations that you can, and communicating different things where, maybe some people have it all figured out, but, that I may struggle in. When I was growing up, I really didn't see a lot of healthy relationships, or the ones that I did see, I wasn't around as much. So, in the end, as I was going through all these trials and tribulations, I started to understand that, I needed to do something different that would impact others. I needed to refocus. I needed to change my life. And, I started to do different things, and then I get sued by Sprint. One of the toughest things ever. I'm sitting at my house, and I get a knock at the door, and this guy pulls up in this Mustang, and he's like, "Are you Brian Vest?" I said, "Yeah." And he drops a stack of papers on my hands, and it was up to about my knee. And I was like, whoa, I was like trying to run after him. "Hey, what are you?" And he just got in his car and took off. And I remember reading this thing, and at first it said, Sprint Corporation versus Brian Vasquez. And I saw these 13 counts of stuff that they said I did, and I was like, wow, what is this all about? I ain't do none of this stuff. And anyways, I started calling up all the top lawyers, and say, hey, what am I going to do to, fight this case? And, long story short, I ended up beating Sprint in a lawsuit. And that was one of the hardest things to do because you waste so much money. I spent about $170,000 fighting this case of money that honestly I didn't have, but I just made it work through the grace of God. But the one thing that I wanted for my children, and it was my children mainly, but then my family and friends to understand that if you didn't do something wrong, you fight for your innocence. Now, you have to pick and choose what that means to you, because sometimes, spend that type of money, it might not be worth it just to, get a settlement or just to walk away from something, and so I do understand that. But for me, it was very key because this is my reputation. It was what I had to go through to let my customers know, and everything that I've done through all these years to know that I am not this person that does fraudulent things. And I've done a lot of bad in my life, but I know one thing: I've never cut a customer short, and I never would go out there and do something that would, try to hurt my business. So I went through this for about 6-7 years, and this damaged a lot about me because I became a mummy. I didn't want to talk to nobody. I remember going to my daughter's basketball games, and that was my safe haven. Like, when my daughter played basketball or she went to practice, I was there, I was around people. But once that was over, I used to go back to the house and I would sit in front of my computer. Pretty much all I would do. I was in a relationship at the time, so that really was detrimental to my relationship. Now, again, I wasn't perfect, in the relationship as well, but it really put a strain on it because, that Sprint was all I was focused on. Like, I wanted to take them down so bad. I wanted to just prove to them that, you might have a little bit more money than me. Well, not a little bit, but a lot more money than me. And you may be a way bigger organization than me. But you know what? I'm going to fight. And I'm going to show you who Brian Vasquez is from Lancaster, PA. And in the end, I was able to get that victory. And it wasn't easy because, I lost in the beginning. I had to appeal it. How many people are going to go appeal it? I think my lawyer, Jim Cornell, he was on my side. We believed in God. And we always said, man, you know what? God's going to take us to the finish line. And so when I won the appeal, I got my trial. I remember that was a tough thing. I was kind of scared and nervous, but you know what? I stuck to the plan, and I just went out there and said what was true. And when you're speaking what's true, it's easy. It's when you're lying and being manipulative and saying different things where you have to always make sure you know what your story is. But in the end, I ended up winning, and I'm currently have a lawsuit out there on Sprint, at this point. But after that, I just kept on working and continuously trying to, get back on my feet, because all that money I spent, and credit cards get maxed out, you have to, get back on your feet and find a way. And so I was able to do that, and through hard work and dedication. But also, I was focused on trying to help others. I always help friends and family. That's always something that's been inside of me, by whether words of wisdom or financially or just doing little things. But I knew I had a bigger purpose in my life to share not only my stories, but also to help people that are going through the same thing that I was. Because when you're going through things, the only thing you're really thinking about is you. You're not thinking about, the other person sometimes, or you're not thinking about, how you can be better from this situation. You're just thinking how you can fix it. Because a lot of times, especially as a man, we're fixers. We want to fix everything so fast. We don't want to try to understand or why somebody needs space or whatever it is. We just want to fix. So I was able to start my Crack a Smile Foundation. And that's where I'm at now. And with the work that we're doing, I'm dealing with individuals a lot like myself, that are dealing with whether drug or alcohol abuse, dealing with breaking the law and going through different things in their life. But, also just trying to find ways to get better because, you got to understand when you're going through these things, you hurt people. And part of your rehabilitation process is trying to get back to the people that you hurt and to make your wrongs right. And sometimes you don't get that opportunity. And that hurts bad, especially when, if you're somebody that's using meth or you're doing different drugs and you're stealing from somebody or you stole from your mother or your father or you did different things. Those are the hardest things because you've broken those relationships. Some parents are forgiving. Some will hold a grudge for you and maybe never talk to you again. So you have to live with that. That hurts. So I found a way where I could talk to these individuals, meet with them, take them out to allow them to understand that, we can't control what happened in our past. Just like I can't control anything that's happened in my past anymore. Through all the trials and tribulations that I've been through, and there's so many more that I could share with you, but I'm trying to make this as short as I can. But what you can do is you can focus on the future. And a lot of my stories always come back to what the main thing is that I understand that some of us are hurt because of relationships. I understand that some of us are hurt because of things that we've done to others, or we're hurt just because in general life things happen. But in the end, you must understand that you're not the only one going through these things. Somebody has it worse than you. And when I look at some of my friends and family and things they have to deal with, when I think about somebody that has to worry about, is their son going to live, or when is he might pass away? And I think about my 2 healthy children. It hurts because I'm over here focused on whether it's a relationship or whether it's something financial. And I can only fathom the pain that somebody's feeling. So I tell my friends and family here, that is pretty much my story. I was very manipulative. I was very dishonest. I was out there drinking. I was selling drugs. I got in trouble with the law. I made mistakes. I have many broken relationships. But I want to be better. And I'm going to be better. And I'm going to continuously work hard to being a better Brian each day. Share what's going on in your life. Don't be afraid to talk about the things that have made you who you are. Be a success story. Understand through your trials and tribulations, you can touch somebody else. With that said, I hope everybody has a wonderful day. I'm going to try to make 40 feel good. I'm going to go out and try to take care of my customers and be strong and try to impact somebody that I may see that may need my help, or somebody that's struggling. Be different. Live, love, and laugh. And remember, if you want to be forgiven, it takes time. Sometimes you may not ever be forgiven, but you must forgive yourself. Thank you very much for your time. Have a wonderful day. God bless you all.